What were creditors in Israel to do for their brethren every seventh year? This is the question that we seek to answer today as we continue our verse-by-verse study of the book of Deuteronomy on Walking Through the Bible.
The glory of his cross.
If you have a Bible with you, turn to Deuteronomy chapter 15. We're going to be reading from verses 1 to 11. If you don't have a Bible, don't worry. Just follow along with us on the screen. The version that we'll be reading from is the New King James Version. So Deuteronomy chapter 15, beginning at verse 1. At the end of every 7 years you shall grant a release of debts, and this is the form of the release. Every creditor who has lent anything to his neighbor shall release it. He shall not require it of his neighbor or his brother, because it is called the Lord's release. Of a foreigner you may require it, but you shall give up your claim to what is owed by your brother, except when there may be no poor among you. For the Lord will greatly bless you in the land which the Lord your God is giving you to possess as an inheritance, only if you carefully obey the voice of the Lord your God, to observe with care all these commandments which I command you today. For the Lord your God will bless you just as he promised you. You shall lend to many nations, you shall not borrow. You shall reign over many nations, but they shall not reign over you. If there is among you a poor man of your brethren, within any of the gates in your land which the Lord your God is giving you, you shall not harden your heart nor shut your hand from your poor brother, but you shall open your hand wide to him, and willingly lend him sufficient for his need, whatever he needs. Beware lest there be a wicked thought in your heart, saying, The 7th year, the year of release, is at hand, and your eye be evil against your poor brother, and you give him nothing, and he cry out to the Lord against you, and it become a sin among you. You shall surely give to him, and your heart should not be grieved when you give to him, because for this thing the Lord your God will bless you in all your works, and in all to which you put your hand. For the poor will never cease from the land. Therefore I command you, saying, You shall open your hand wide to your brother, to your poor, and to your needy in your land. In our last lesson, we discussed God's law concerning tithing. Tithing and its purpose were dealt with in our studies of Leviticus and Numbers, so for a fuller discussion of those principles, we invite you to listen in full to those studies. What we find here in Deuteronomy is a repetition of those principles, as well as some accommodations provided by God to the one who has to travel a long way to where the tabernacle would be situated. If someone was in that situation, they could sell their tithe for money, come to the place where the tabernacle was, and use the money to purchase something to tithe. In this way, God's command could be fulfilled, but at the same time not be onerous on the one who had to travel far ways. Coming now to chapter 15, Moses introduces to us a principle in Israel concerning creditors. At the end of every 7 years, debtors were to be granted a release from their debts. Now, this doesn't mean that the debt would be erased. It simply meant that it would not be pressed for during that 7th year. Why would God make such a provision? For that, we have to remember our past studies of Leviticus. In Leviticus 25, verses 1 to 7, there we read, And the Lord spoke to Moses on Mount Sinai, saying, Speak to the children of Israel and say to them, When you come into the land which I give you, and then the land shall keep a Sabbath to the Lord. 6 years shall you sow in your field, and 6 years you shall prune your vineyard, and gather its fruit. But in the 7th year there shall be a Sabbath of solemn rest for the land, a Sabbath to the Lord. You shall neither sow your field nor prune your vineyard. What grows of its own according to your harvest you shall not reap, nor gather the grapes of your untended vine, for it is a year of rest for the land. And the Sabbath produce of the land shall be food for you, your male and your female servants, your hired man and the stranger who dwells with you, for your livestock and the beasts that are in your land. All its produce shall be for food. Most people listening to this podcast probably have a day job, which will earn them a living. What I mean by this is that most people likely aren't farmers that depend on crops to make money. Israel had a largely agricultural-based economy. So if God commanded that every 7th year the land be given a year of rest, that meant that the farmers wouldn't be making any money that year. That is why for 1 year creditors were told not to collect debts during that year. This stipulation applied only to Israelites, however, and not to foreigners, for foreigners could still make money during the 7th year. Verse 4, as translated in the New King James, also makes it appear that creditors would also be given exception to this rule if there is no poor among them, meaning that everybody would have the means to pay, even in the 7th year. Accepting this as another exception would seem to be at odds with verse 11 of this chapter, which says that the poor will be present in Israel always. Instead, what this verse should be understood as meaning is that the stipulation existed so that there shall be no poor among you. The ordinance is not intended to prevent creditors seeking the payment of their just debts, but only to prevent their being poor in the land. Because the Lord would bless them, creditors wouldn't be worse off by having to wait an extra year before collecting their debts. Now, this ordinance might cause some people to look at their calendars, see that it was the 6th year, and decide that since debts couldn't be collected in the 7th year, I just won't lend out anything in the 6th year. The Lord called this a wicked thought, for the poor would be among them always, and as such, they were commanded to be taken care of by their brethren. So if the poor needed something, those who could help were to help, no matter when that help was needed. That is a principle that we should consider today as it concerns our relationship not only with the needy of this world, but the needy among our brethren. With that, our time is up for today. Lord willing, we hope you'll join us for tomorrow's discussion of Deuteronomy chapter 15, verses 12 to 23, as we continue our walk through the Bible, one verse at a time.
Thank you for watching today's episode. We hope that you found it edifying and ask that you not only subscribe to our channel and podcast, but that you like and share this episode among your friends so that the saving gospel of Jesus Christ can go out to the whole world.